What's happening, guys? Sam Adams here, and instead of doing an edition of The Drop this week, I figured since nothing major was coming out and the ones that were coming out kind of got delayed, that I would go ahead and talk about the best games of 2016 to date. Now, this is not including all of the games that are coming out after today's date, July 18th, 2016, but so far this year there have been a lot of major releases that have really blown me away, so I thought that we would take some time to reflect back on what 2016 has brought us so far. So let's talk about Doom. Now, whenever I first heard this game was coming to the PlayStation 4, Xbox One, and PC, I'll be the first to admit that I was a little bit hesitant. I was kind of worried. I didn't actually think that this would work out as well as it did because of what Doom, the franchise, actually is. It's such a classic game. It's such an iconic franchise. It's a pillar of the gaming world, and it's one of the ancestors of the modern FPS that whenever you're remaking it and bringing this kind of game to a new generation of gamers, the developers always run the risk of incorporating too many new gameplay mechanics, incorporating too much or too many modern traits into a game that simply doesn't need them. However, what Doom does well is that it balances the graphics that we expect from modern day games with gameplay that is still a callback to the original Doom games, while also incorporating a couple of new mechanics that do make it feel like a modern FPS game. On the surface, it doesn't look too complex. It does appear to just be focusing on the shooting mechanics, focusing on the blood and glory kills, and all of the gore that you would expect from a Doom game. However, what's really cool is that hidden within the Easter eggs, hidden within the levels and the secrets that you can uncover if you do pay enough attention, it's actually a pretty in-depth story with a good amount of lore. So for those that are looking for an in-depth game with some story to it, you can find it in Doom if you do choose to pay attention. And that's where a lot of the replay value does come in, is playing through it once, just enjoying the gore, enjoying the blood, enjoying the explosions and incredible weapons, and then going back through it again and really getting a grasp of what's actually happening within the story. Now, as far as the multiplayer goes, there are some pretty good offerings here. It is not going to suck away your time like a Battlefield or an Overwatch. However, there is a pretty good variety of different ways that you can play the game. It is arena-based in its nature, and it does rely heavily on just traveling around the map and shooting whoever you find, and it is very fast-paced, which is something that I really enjoyed when playing the beta and the alpha, I believe is what I got into. I've played a good many hours of it, and I have to admit that it does grab your attention, but like I said, it's not going to lock you in. The campaign is definitely where Doom shines, and that's perfectly fine. What it comes down to is that the game is incredible, and that's why it's on the list of my best games of 2016 so far. Now, next up we have Superhot, which is a game that actually, surprisingly enough, does have a lot of replay value, even though it does have a pretty short campaign. I would guess you can finish the story in about 6 hours, and it's really not that in-depth of a story. However, it is some very interesting social commentary. I'm not going to ruin that for you, but what is Superhot? The concept of the game is pretty much that time only moves when you do. So whenever you move, time moves a little bit, and therefore enemies can also move, and when you stand still, they move ever so slightly. Now, this also is affected by when you fire weapons, whenever you swing a katana, whenever you are punching something. That is the kind of premise behind the game, so you really have to meticulously plan and place your punches, your hits, your movements. It's all very, very timed and very well planned, but it is so much fun whenever you learn how to play the game. Now, as you progress through the levels, you do learn more mechanics, you learn how to use more weapons more efficiently, and ultimately you get better at the game, and by the time you've completed the campaign, you have a lot of different options of what you can do. You can go back and play through the campaign and try different kinds of routes, try different kinds of weapons, or you can memorize a specific route and try and beat your best time on the leaderboards. However, where the game really shines after you complete the story is through the endless mode, which, as the name actually does hint, is pretty much endless rounds of enemies just coming at you from all sides and angles, and you have to hold your own against them, which is, like I said, where the game really does shine after the campaign is over. Like I said, I didn't expect to enjoy Superhot nearly as much as I did, and it's still a game that I do go back and play from time to time and do have a good time with it, and I have to admit that it is one of the most innovative shooters that I have played in years, which is one of the reasons you should definitely check it out if you have a PC or an Xbox One. So next up we have Uncharted 4: A Thief's End, which I'm not even going to lie, I was expecting a lot of coming right out of the gate because of what it is. If you're a PlayStation fan or you follow the PlayStation Nation, so to speak, you would know that there have been 3 Uncharted games on the PlayStation 3, 1 on the PlayStation Vita, and 1 shitty mobile thing that we're not even going to talk about. But the fact of the matter is, we've been seeing the story of Nathan Drake, broadcasted across the entire PlayStation community since 2007, and it's become one of the most iconic PlayStation franchises. And so Nathan Drake has become one of those icons of the PlayStation brand, and so to see this franchise come to a close is not only saddening, but it also makes the gamers expect a lot more from the finale of his story. So whenever Uncharted 4 opens, we see Nathan Drake working at a salvage yard. He has retired from fortune hunting, retired from adventuring, and he has decided to go ahead and settle down, but quite frankly, he is not satisfied with this kind of lifestyle. Luckily, his long assumed dead brother, who they were trying to break out, and I won't get into it, but pretty much, because you need to experience this, but pretty much he has the offer of a lifetime to get back into fortune hunting, to get back into adventuring one last time, and try and find the lost pirate treasure that is somewhere around the world that he has to find. It's a very interesting story, and it definitely kept me enthralled all the way throughout it, which is something that a couple of other Uncharted games have kind of lost me in. I didn't really get into 1 that much, and 3 was really fun as far as the gameplay went, but the story didn't really grab me. This is definitely the best Uncharted story since Uncharted 2, and that's a big pair of shoes to fill because many people consider that the best game of the entire franchise. So now, considering the nature of Naughty Dog, Uncharted 4 does rely heavily on the story itself because they are pretty much the kings of storytelling, especially as far as PlayStation goes, and I would say they're probably some of the best in the industry. That being said, there is a ton of other stuff to do in Uncharted 4 if you do get bored. There are tons of collectibles to find, there are treasures to hunt within the campaign itself, and of course then you have that multiplayer offering, which, although challenging, is pretty fun whenever you play a couple of matches and do get the hang of it. So the question remains, is Uncharted 4 the best in the entire franchise? And I'm going to have to say that it's at least on the same level as Uncharted 2, if not a little bit above it. So it's definitely one that you have to check out if you have a PlayStation 4 or are planning on getting one in the next couple of years. It's going to be one of the most iconic games that is a standout for this entire generation, not just the PlayStation 4. So next up we have Ratchet and Clank, which is a game that is pretty significant for my childhood, which is probably one of the reasons that it made this list, but I'm more impressed with the way the game was handled rather than what the game is itself. So for those that aren't familiar, Ratchet & Clank is a classic game that was made by Insomniac Games back in, I believe, the early 2000s, around 2002 if I remember correctly, and it's one of those games that a lot of people played growing up. Now, of course, there was a movie that was released to go alongside this remaster, and the remaster was made to go alongside the movie. It all just kind of worked out very well, but instead of making an entirely new story, creating a new world for Ratchet & Clank, they went back to the drawing board and literally remade the original game from the ground up, and it looks and plays incredibly. Now, what the 2016 Ratchet & Clank does right is that it stays true to the original game. It brings all of the quirky weapons, it brings all the strange characters, it brings all of the original story and all of the friendship and humor between Ratchet and Clank that I loved so much as a kid. It brings all of those elements to the PlayStation 4 and caters not only to people like me that played the original back in the day, but also brings that experience to a new generation of gamers and more generations to come as people are looking back on the PlayStation 4 as a budget console. You know, people are going to be buying a PlayStation 4 in a couple of years for probably around $150 whenever the next PlayStation is out, and they're going to be able to play this Ratchet & Clank, and new gamers are going to be able to look back and play this game that by that time is going to be over 2 decades old and still love it just as much as I did back in the early 2000s. That's great. Now, last but not least, we have a little game by the name of Overwatch that has absolutely taken the internet and the world by storm since it was released in May. Now, this is developed and published by Blizzard Entertainment, who is, of course, pretty notorious for games like World of Warcraft, Diablo, Hearthstone, StarCraft. They're pretty big in the gaming industry, and so a lot of people had high expectations whenever they first made the announcement a couple of years ago that they were getting into the FPS scene, and they did very well with it, if I do say so myself. So now, overall, the game mechanics are very simple, but that is not saying that Overwatch is a simple game. It is pretty complex because of the character lineup, and these people are known as heroes. Now, at launch, there were 21 heroes, and they are all very, very diverse, each having 2 different abilities and 1 special ultimate that is unique to that specific character. Now, whenever you're playing or you first pick up Overwatch, you might find that you have a character that you think is better than the rest of them, and you might very well play that character better than the standard person might pick up and play. But that being said, each character has at least 3 counters, meaning that no character is more overpowered than any character really is within the game at any time, making everything fairly balanced. And if you have a good coordinated team, you can absolutely dominate if you play with each other's strengths and you pinpoint the other team's weaknesses. With Overwatch, I feel like it really does prove that within an arena shooter, you don't need an in-depth gun customization system. You don't need a ton of different maps. You don't need all these little nitty-gritty things. You don't need that. At the core of what Overwatch is, it is simply a good game, and it definitely shines through, and I feel like that's one of the things that people often miss. They're trying to put too many bells and whistles into the game, whenever Overwatch just said, we want to make a good, balanced arena shooter that is diverse, that is complex, that is simple, and they really did accomplish that with Overwatch, and I have to applaud applaud that. They did very well. All of that being said, I believe that Overwatch does have a lot of life left in it, and it is going to remain in the casual scene for a very long time. And on top of that, I feel like the competitive scene for Overwatch is going to continue to grow because there have already been a lot of tournaments that do have cash prizes that have seen a lot of success, that have seen a lot of publicity, so that's going to be interesting. Overall, I'm glad that Overwatch has worked out, and that's why it is on my list of the best games of 2016 so far. So there you guys have it. Those are my top games of 2016 so far, but of course these are only 5 of my selections. There are a ton of games that have come out over the course of the past couple of months that are totally worth playing and probably should have been on this list that I forgot to include, and be sure to leave those in the comments section down below so that myself and other people can go back and play these. But at the end of the day, find something that you like and just really enjoy it while you can. But all of that being said, take some time to check out some of my other content. I upload new stuff like 3 or 4 days a week depending on the week, so there's always something new right here on the channel when you stop by to watch some videos. But as for right now, I want to thank each and every one of you guys for watching this particular video. I'll talk to you soon. Peace.